as Allied forces advanced against Japanese troops along the Arakan border in the South Pacific in December 1942. RAF Wing Commander Frank Reginald Carey was refueling at Chittagong. The seasoned veteran was enjoying a cigarette inside his cockpit when over 30 enemy aircraft broke through the clouds in attack formation. Carey fired up his engine and ordered the ground crew to safety. Enemy bullets landed around him, hitting his Hurricane, but it was not enough to stop him from luring away the enemy from his airmen. Carey began zigzagging in the air to make himself a harder target. Carey, who once was on the RAF aerobatics team, led the Japanese pursuers over a river surrounded by trees. After running out of ammunition, the wing commander dashed towards a nearby hill and pulled back the stick at the last second. His maneuver worked. One of the Japanese fighters behind him crashed into the mountain in a ball of smoldering fire. Upon returning to his men, Carey jokingly shouted, quote, "I lost a lot of weight in that sortie." Royal Air Force legend Frank Reginald Carey was born in Brixton, London on May 7, 1912, to Alfred John Carey and Elsie Mabel Carey. During the Prussian Zeppelin raids of World War I, young Frank, like many other children of his time, had to take care of his siblings when their parents ordered them to hide below their beds during the bombing raids. This experience, although daunting, shaped his character and instilled a sense of responsibility in him. Witnessing German and British aircraft soaring over the skies during the Prussian Zeppelin raids of World War I ignited a spark in Frank's heart. While educated at Belvedere School, Hayward's Heath, Frank often conversed with a former student who had become a fighter pilot in the Royal Air Force and performed low flypasts over the school. With his daring maneuvers and thrilling stories, this former student inspired Frank to pursue a career in aviation. Watching the aircraft perform incredible aerobatic moves made Frank Carey's adrenaline rush through his veins, fueling his determination to seek a career as a fighter pilot, despite his father's objections, given his family's economic needs. At 15, he joined the Royal Air Force as a Halton apprentice, undergoing technical training to become an expert in repairing aircraft, eventually becoming an airframe fitter in 1930. The eager Briton climbed through the ranks slowly, and later began flying Bristol Bulldogs and Hawker's Demons in the early 1930s. His fellow co-pilots, impressed by his skill and small frame, affectionately baptized him as the Chota, an Indian name for little one, due to his 5'3" stature. Between 1938 and early 1939, Chota Carey flew war exercises among future aces such as Caesar Hull and Peter Townsend, as part of Britain's assumption that the German Luftwaffe could cross the North Sea with bombers as tensions rose with the Third Reich. That moment soon came true. World War II erupted on September 1, 1939, after the Third Reich invaded Poland. Britain and France, upholding their ultimatum to Adolf Hitler to withdraw from Polish territory, declared war. This marked the beginning of intense hostilities. During this initial phase, known as the Phony War, Allied troops hesitated to launch significant offensives, limiting their actions to minor attacks on Germany's Saar district. Despite the relative inactivity on the front lines, Chota Carey and his fellow airmen were actively preparing for the inevitable escalation of warfare. The anticipation of combat stirred a mix of anxiety and eagerness among these airmen, who were keen to test their combat skills. As the war progressed into the winter of 1940, the first real opportunity for action presented itself. In late January, Hull and Carey, tasked with defending Britain, scrambled to intercept 9 Heinkel HE-111 bombers that had breached British airspace. Despite their efforts, the enemy aircraft eluded them, disappearing swiftly over the English coast. However, the persistence paid off the following day when Carey and Hull engaged another group of Heinkel HE-111s. This encounter resulted in their first confirmed shootdown, marking a significant milestone in their aerial careers. The momentum continued into February when Chota Carey and his unit surprised several aircraft from Kampfgeschwader 30, which included Ju-88s and HE-111s. Leveraging his aerobatic prowess, Carey executed swift maneuvers to evade enemy fire and successfully contributed to the downing of 3 enemy planes. His remarkable skill and bravery in these engagements earned him the Distinguished Flying Medal on February 21, 1940. Barely days after this recognition, Carey was back in the air, this time near the Northern Isles. He successfully shot down an enemy bomber, further proving his aerial dominance. His consistent performance led to his promotion to flight sergeant in March. Now commissioned as a pilot officer and joining No. 3 Squadron, Chota Carey was ready for the next level of challenge. The war was intensifying, and his capabilities would soon be tested against the formidable Luftwaffe. This escalation marked a pivotal point in Carey's military career, as he was thrust into the thick of aerial combat, where his skills would face the ultimate test. On May 10, 1940, No. 3 Squadron was dispatched to France just as the Third Reich launched Operation Case Yellow, the mass invasion of Belgium, France, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. As the sun fell, casting long shadows over the airfield, Carey and his squadron had already dismissed the day as uneventful, their aircraft low on fuel, and spirits tempered by the lack of engagement with the enemy. Just before their wheels touched down on the runway of their new base, an urgent command crackled through their radios. They were to divert immediately to Lille, near Flanders, where Kampfgeschwader 54 of the Luftwaffe was mounting a fierce assault. With adrenaline consuming them, Carey and his fellow pilots throttled their engines and redirected their course, their resolve hardened by the sudden call to action. Carey's eyes narrowed as they plunged into the fray, his focus sharpening on the chaos that unfolded before them. The skies above Lille roared with a cacophony of engines screaming and cannons thundering. With the calm precision that had become his trademark, Carey wove through the maelstrom of flak and tracer fire. One by one, 3 German fighters fell from the sky, their fiery descent marking Carey's triumph. Yet, despite the ferocity of the encounter, his aircraft emerged from the storm of battle, marked only by a few superficial bullet holes, a testament to both the robustness of his machine and his skill as a pilot. The day had turned from routine to remarkable, and Carey once again proved his mettle in combat. These were his first trophies as a solo hunter, earning him praise from the higher-ups. Unfortunately, Carey's streak was threatened after the unit's Bristol bomb bay, carrying spare parts to repair their aircraft, was shot down by the enemy, forcing him to employ his battered aircraft until another bomb bay was dispatched. With the German menace looming over France, Carey and the squadron were ordered to fly air superiority missions to support the French First Army during the Battle of Hanut, which raged for over 2 days. Carey flew 4 missions, meeting heavy anti-aircraft fire, but making it out alive to storm an enemy air patrol and destroy German HE-111s. On May 13th, while flying over Belgium, Carey swiftly vanquished 6 enemy pilots, becoming an ace in a day. Throughout the month, the young lad and 3rd Squadron continued providing support to British, Belgian, and French units, with Carey claiming 2 other Ju-87 Stukas, 1 Dornier Do-17 bomber, and 1 Henschel HS-123 biplane to his trophy wall. Days later, Carey was in hot pursuit of a Dornier-17 bomber, its descent marking what he hoped would be his 15th victory in a relentless 6-day stretch of aerial combat. As he closed in, he could see the slumped figure of the enemy pilot through the cockpit. Yet, victory was not to be his this time. Unbeknownst to Carey, the rear gunner, still very much alive and determined, seized this chance for retribution. With a steady hand, he fired at Carey's Hurricane. Bullets tore through the fuselage, igniting the aircraft and striking Carey in the leg. Engulfed in flames and pain, Carey was shot down, his impressive streak of downing about 14 enemy aircraft over those 6 intense days of combat coming to an abrupt and fiery end. With flames licking the fuselage of his wounded Hurricane, Carey executed a hasty yet controlled landing in a field precariously nested between Allied and enemy lines. He quickly disembarked and caught the attention of a Belgian soldier passing by on a motorcycle. Carey jumped aboard, the pair speeding away from the frontline chaos. Their journey was brief. Soon, Carey found himself amidst a weary group of refugees trudging along the road. It was not long before a British Army truck filled with supplies halted beside them, offering a ride. The truck's destination was a casualty clearing station in Dieppe, a sanctuary amidst the turmoil. Here, Carey encountered an unexpected figure, the 16th Duke of Norfolk, a fellow countryman sidelined by gout, who greeted him with a wry apology for the less than heroic circumstances of their meeting. However, their respite was short-lived. As enemy forces closed in, their temporary haven came under threat. The hospital train meant to carry them to safety was bombed in an aggressive airstrike. Amidst the chaos and confusion, Carey and the Duke managed a narrow escape from the wreckage. Driven by a soldier's instinct, they did not flee. Instead, they turned back into the smoke and debris to assist those too wounded to move on their own. The urgency of the situation spurred Carey to make a daring decision. He organized a group of more than a dozen men and commandeered an abandoned Bristol Bombay aircraft at Nantes. With Carey at the controls, they flew out of the encroaching danger and back to British soil, just as the nation braced for the impending Battle of Britain. This harrowing return not only saved lives, but also brought Carey back in time to once again stand in defense of his homeland. Upon arriving in the UK, Carey learned he had been listed as missing and was believed to have been lost. Soon after rejoining the RAF, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and Bar for his top-notch performance over the skies of France. After a well-deserved rest, Carey rejoined his squadron, began recon missions, and shot down several enemy barrage balloons in early July. Carey also flew several patrol missions, protecting Allied shipping from the Luftwaffe, damaging 2 enemy Me-109s during these operations. On July 19th, he faced 2 Bf-109s in a dogfight that involved intrepid aerobatic maneuvers to stay alive and ahead of the enemy. Making the most of his agility, Carey scored hits on 2 enemy pilots and shot down 1, probably taking out German pilot Erbograf von Kogeneck, credited with 67 air victories. A month later, Carey's squadron suffered heavy casualties after attempting to stop a German air raid comprised of more than a dozen Luftwaffe aircraft. Carey himself was wounded but survived the impossible task, which he later described as like trying to stop a steamroller. When the Luftwaffe launched Adlertag, or Eagle Day, to destroy or damage as many British airbases as possible, Carey and his squadron flew non-stop operations to fend off the swarm of German aircraft, engaging bombers and fighters alike. On August 18, 1940, Carey engaged a German force of over 50 fighters and bombers. Me-109s, Bf-109s, and Ju-87s clashed in the skies with British Hurricanes and Spitfires in ruthless charges that ended with mid-air explosions and devastation. Carey, restless and committed to defending the homeland, never turned his back on the enemy, destroying 2 Ju-87s before being wounded in the knee by a stray bullet. In February 1941, amid the Blitz bombing campaign, Carey received his new assignment: protect the sky for the British colonial territories in the Far East. The veteran British pilot was about to meet a new enemy that, unlike the Germans, was willing to fight until the bitter end, no matter the odds: the Imperial Japanese aces. After logging more than 1,160 hours and more than 50 air operations, Carey left behind 43rd Squadron and was posted as an instructor with his new rank of flight lieutenant. Carey, now acting as squadron leader of 135th Squadron, arrived in Burma in January 1942 and was briefed on the situation in the Pacific Theater, following Japan's bombing of Pearl Harbor. With a new Allied force in the region, the British prepared to retake Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Singapore. The impetus of the Japanese Empire did not end, and soon its forces invaded Burma, swiftly destroying the Royal Navy. In the desperate fight to stop the enemy, Carey and 135th Squadron took to the air aboard the newer Hurricane Mark IIAs and their powerful 12 machine guns. Facing the Japanese for the first time, Carey was nervous but focused when he spotted the enemy in the air. He saw a Nakajima Ki-27 fighter and pulled the trigger, eager to test the Mark IIA machine gun's firepower. The effect was instant, and the enemy fighter came down, shrouded by smoke and fire. While dogfighting over Mingaladon, the Britons were joined by a unit of American P-40 Kitty Hawks. Reinvigorated by his allies, Carey charged against the enemy formation, firing another burst and tearing several bullet holes in another enemy airframe. A month later, Carey was promoted to wing commander and immediately conducted a ground attack against the Japanese-occupied airfield at Raheng. He led his men into battle despite heavy anti-aircraft fire, delivering their payloads and destroying several Ki-27s and Ki-43s. The turbulence from enemy fire was not enough to dissuade the Britons from their mission, and soon enough, the airfield below was being consumed by fire. No enemy fighters were able to take off to intercept them. While in Calcutta, Carey was awarded a bar to his Distinguished Flying Cross before fending off Japanese incursions into Indian airspace. In October 1942, Carey ascended to officer, commanding the 165th Wing of the Royal Air Force. As Allied forces advanced against the Japanese along the Arakan border, Carey was refueling at Chittagong. Suddenly, he was attacked by over 27 enemy aircraft while still in his cockpit. Reflecting on the incident, he recalled, quote, "I started my engine immediately and shouted to the ground crew to take cover. Even before I was airborne, bullets flew and kicked up dust around me. Once in the air, I began jinking and skidding to make myself a difficult target. Fortune favored me as I led the Japanese planes up the river, flying just above the riverbeds. As Chota's guns fell silent, out of ammunition, he did not retreat. He pushed his aircraft toward a nearby hill, pulling back on the throttle in a calculated last-second maneuver. His audacity paid off. A heartbeat later, the Japanese wing leader, unable to match Chota's cunning, crashed into the mountain in a fiery explosion. When Chota regrouped with his squadron, the moment's tension gave way to a lighter mood. With a grin, he remarked, quote, "I lost a lot of weight in that sortie," a joke that brought relieved chuckles from his fellow pilots, admiring his cool demeanor under pressure. Following operations at Chittagong, Carey was appointed to the Air Fighting Unit to train newcomers in air warfare. In November 1944, the RAF pilot took on a new challenge, leading the 73rd Operational Training Unit at Fayed, Egypt, for operations in Italy, but he never saw combat again. After the war, Carey was honored with a permanent commission and shared his expertise by teaching tactics at the Central Fighter Establishment. His career flourished with various staff roles until 1958, when he became the air advisor to the British High Commission in Australia. After dedicating 35 years to the RAF, Carey retired in 1962 and partnered with Rolls-Royce, representing their aero division across Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. He spent his later years in the calm landscape of Bognor Regis, reflecting on a life of service and adventure. Throughout his service, Carey was credited with 23 aircraft shot down, 6 shared destroyed, 4 unconfirmed, 2 destroyed on the ground, and 10 damaged, turning him into a top ace in the British ranks.